I stood in the church vestibule with my coat sleeves still damp from the rain, holding a hymn book someone had pressed into my hands. The ink had smudged on my thumb. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Outside, through the tall windows, I could see the ocean half a mile down the hill, gray water meeting gray sky. The same view Richard and I had watched from the beach house every summer for 31 years. My son Michael was talking to his wife near the guest book, their heads bent close, and I caught the edge of his glance, toward me. Not grief. Calculation. The service had ended 20 minutes ago. People were filing toward the parish hall for coffee, and those dry cookies that taste like kindness. I'd shaken so many hands, my palm ached. But Michael hadn't hugged me. He'd squeezed my shoulder once, said we need to talk about the house, and moved on to accept condolences from Richard's golf buddies. The house, not Dad's house or the beach place, just the house. I tucked the hymn book onto the wooden pew back and smoothed my skirt. The fabric was wool, navy blue, appropriate. Richard would have hated the fuss, but he would have understood why I wore it. I could almost hear him. Claire, you don't owe anyone theater, just be you. I thought about the one phone call I'd make in about an hour, the call that would keep the keys exactly where they belonged, in my pocket. Richard and I bought the beach house in 1994. With money his mother left him and a chunk of my teacher's pension buyout. It was a cedar shake cottage, 4 blocks from the water, 2 bedrooms, a screened porch that needed replacing even then. We closed in April and spent that whole summer pulling up linoleum and painting trim. Michael was 13. He helped for about 45 minutes the first weekend, then spent the rest of the season skateboarding with kids from the next street over. I didn't mind. I wanted him to have a place that felt like freedom. Richard and I had grown up in apartments, his in Queens, mine in a triple-decker, outside Boston, so owning a house near the ocean felt like a kind of magic we'd conjured together. We kept a coffee can on the kitchen counter for a beach glass collection. By Labor Day it was half full. Richard taught high school English for 34 years. I taught second grade for 29. We weren't wealthy. We were careful. The beach house stayed in our names, jointly. Because that's how we did everything: joint checking, joint decisions, joint dreams. When Richard's salary jumped after he became department head, we paid off the mortgage early. I have the discharge letter in a drawer at home, dated 2009, signed by a bank officer whose name I've forgotten. Michael graduated college, worked in finance for a while, then pivoted to sales. He married Jennifer when he was 30. She's fine, polished, efficient, the kind of person who sends thank you notes within 24 hours. They have no children. They live in a new construction neighborhood, 40 minutes inland, all beige siding and irrigation systems. Jennifer works in marketing. I've never been entirely sure what that means, but she's good at it. The beach house became ours, mine in Richardson, a way it never was Michael's. He'd visit for a weekend in July, maybe a long weekend in September. He'd complain about the water pressure. Jennifer would wipe down the counters with bleach wipes she brought from home. They never stayed longer than 2 nights. Still, I noticed the shift about 3 years ago. Michael started asking questions. How much was the place worth now? Had we thought about selling? What would happen if one of us got sick? Wouldn't it be smart to liquidate? Richard would smile and change the subject. We're not liquidating anything, buddy. We're keeping it till we're too old to climb the porch steps. But Richard got sick anyway. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in February, dead by October. The gap between those 2 points was a tunnel of hospital visits, experimental drugs that didn't work, and long quiet hours when he'd hold my hand and tell me what mattered. One of those things: don't let anyone bully you out of the beach house, Claire. You kept that place running. You paid the taxes. You're the one who called the roofer when the shingles blew off. Michael doesn't get to swoop in and rewrite history. I'd nodded. I hadn't known I'd need to remember that conversation so soon. The parish hall smelled like burnt coffee and lemon furniture polish. I accepted a paper cup from someone's aunt and stood near the window, watching rain bead on the glass. Michael found me there. Mom, he touched my elbow. Can we talk? Of course. He glanced around, then steered me toward a corner by the coat rack. Jennifer appeared at his side, holding her phone. We've been thinking, Michael said. His voice was low, steady, the tone he probably used in sales meetings. About the beach house. I sipped the coffee. It tasted like dirt. We know this is a tough day, Jennifer added, her smile gentle and practiced. But we wanted to bring it up while family's here, before things get complicated. I looked at my son. His tie was slightly crooked. I wanted to reach up and fix it, the way I'd done 1,000 times when he was small. Bring what up? I asked. Michael pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, tapped the screen, and turned it toward me. We talked to a real estate agent last week. Just exploratory. The market's really strong right now. We could list the house for 800,000, maybe more. Split it clean. No hassle. I stared at the phone. There was a photo of our beach house, pulled from some public listing site. The angle made the porch look bigger than it was. Split it, I repeated. Well, yeah. Michael's eyebrows lifted, like this was obvious. It's part of Dad's estate. We'd divide it fairly. You'd get your share, I'd get mine, and we'd both move on without the headache of joint ownership. Jennifer nodded. It makes sense, Claire. You don't need the burden of maintaining 2 properties, and honestly, at your age I held up one hand, not angry, just stopping her. Michael, I said, the house is in my name, mine and your father's. He's gone, so now it's mine. There's nothing to split. His face went carefully blank. Mom, that's not how inheritance works. I'm his son. I have a legal right. To what? I kept my voice even. To a house your father and I bought before you graduated middle school. A house we paid for, maintained, and kept in our names for 31 years. Dad would have wanted me to have it, Michael said. His jaw tightened. Your father wanted me to keep it, I replied. He told me so. In the hospital, in August, when you were busy with that sales conference in Denver, the air between us went cold. Jennifer's smile faltered. Michael's hand dropped to his side, phone still glowing. We'll talk about this later, he said. Yes, I agreed, we will. He walked away. Jennifer followed, her heels clicking on the linoleum. I finished the coffee and set the cup on a folding table. Then I went to the restroom, locked the door, and called my lawyer. His name is Alan Greer. He handled our wills, the mortgage discharge, and the paperwork when Richard's mother died. He's 71, semi-retired, but he still keeps office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I got his voicemail. Alan, it's Claire Donovan. I need your help with something. My son is trying to claim the beach house, and I want to make sure no one can transfer or sell it without my knowledge. Call me when you can. Thank you. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair needed touching up at the roots. My lipstick had worn off. I looked exactly like what I was, a 63-year-old widow whose husband had been dead for 4 days, but I didn't look weak. I washed my hands, dried them on a paper towel, and went back out to face the rest of the afternoon. Alan called at 6:30 that evening, while I was sitting in my kitchen sorting through sympathy cards. Most of them said things like "in our thoughts" or "with deepest sympathy." One had a pressed flower taped inside. I didn't recognize the handwriting. Claire. Alan's voice was warm, familiar. I'm so sorry about Richard. He was a good man. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. Tell me what's going on. I laid it out in 3 minutes. Michael's demand at the funeral, his talk of splitting the estate, his assumption that the beach house was somehow up for grabs. Alan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Do you have the deed handy? I can get it." "Do that. I'll hold." I went to the filing cabinet in the hallway and pulled the folder labeled Beach House Deed and Taxes. The deed was on top. A legal-size sheet with our names printed in bold. Richard Paul Donovan and Claire Marie Donovan, joint tenants with right of survivorship. I read it aloud to Alan. Perfect, he said. That phrase, joint tenants with right of survivorship, means the house passes directly to you. No probate, no splitting. It's yours. Full stop. Michael has no claim. Relief washed over me, but I kept my voice steady. He seems to think he does. He's wrong. But I'll tell you what we can do to make sure there's no funny business. I'll record a notice with the County Anne Affidavit of Survivorship. It's a public document that officially moves the title into your name alone. Once it's filed, no one can sell, transfer, or mortgage the property without your signature. It's a firewall. How long does that take? I can file it electronically tomorrow morning. You'll have a recorded copy by end of business. Do it, I said. Consider it done. And Claire, if Michael pushes back, you send him to me. I'll explain it in whatever terms he needs to hear. Thank you, Alan. You paid for that house, he said quietly. You maintained it. You earned it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the furnace kick on and off. The sympathy cards were still spread across the table. I gathered them into a neat stack and put them in a drawer. Then I made myself a cup of tea and went to bed. Alan emailed me the next afternoon. The subject line read, "Recorded Beach House Title." I opened the attachment. It was a one-page affidavit, stamped and signed by the county clerk, confirming that the beach house now belonged to me alone. The language was plain. Claire Marie Donovan, surviving joint tenant, is hereby confirmed as sole owner of the property located at 47 Sandpiper Lane. I printed 2 copies. One went into the filing cabinet. The other I folded and tucked into my purse. Michael called that evening. "Mom, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Jennifer and I have been talking to people, friends, family. Everyone agrees it's not fair for you to keep the whole house. Dad would have wanted me to have something." I let him finish. Then I said, "Michael, I spoke to Alan Greer yesterday. He filed a document with the county that confirms the house is mine. It was always mine and your father's, jointly. Now, it's mine alone. That's how joint tenancy works." Silence. "You can't just—" "I didn't just do anything," I said. "I followed the law. Alan can explain it to you if you'd like, but the short version is this: the house passes directly to me. No probate, no estate division. Your father and I set it up that way on purpose." "This is unbelievable," Michael said. His voice had gone tight. "You're really going to cut me out?" "I'm not cutting you out of anything," I replied. "I'm keeping what your father and I built. If you want to talk about the beach house respectfully, about maybe using it for a week next summer, or helping me decide what to do with it down the line, I'm open to that. But I won't be bullied, and I won't be guilt-tripped." He hung up. I sat on the couch, phone in my lap, and stared at the wall. The living room was too quiet. Richard used to fill it with NPR and the rustle of the newspaper. Now there was just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the mantel clock. I thought about calling Michael back. I thought about apologizing, even though I had nothing to apologize for. Instead, I got up and made dinner. The next day, Jennifer called. "Claire, it's me." Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." "I don't think we did," I said. "I think you and Michael made assumptions, and I corrected them." She paused. I heard her take a breath. "Michael's hurt. He feels like you don't trust him." "This isn't about trust," I said. "It's about ownership. The house is mine. That's not an opinion. It's a legal fact." "But you're not being fair, Jennifer. I paid the property taxes on that house for 31 years. I have the receipts. I hired the roofer when the shingles blew off in 2019. I have the invoice. I renewed the homeowner's insurance every year. I have the policy documents. Your husband visited twice a year and complained about the water pressure. So when you tell me I'm not being fair, I need you to explain what you mean by fair." She didn't answer right away. "We just think," she said finally, "that families should share." "I agree," I said. "And when your husband starts acting like family instead of a real estate appraiser, we can talk about sharing. Until then, the house stays with me." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. I made another cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of mail I hadn't opened yet. Most of it was junk. A few bills. A postcard from the dentist reminding me about my cleaning. I thought about Richard, about the way he'd sit at this same table every Sunday morning, doing the crossword in pen, humming under his breath, about the way he'd look up and smile when I brought him coffee. Look, he would have been proud of me. I let myself believe that. The following Saturday, I drove to the beach house. It was the first time I'd been there since Richard got sick. The key still fit the lock. The door still stuck in the same spot. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. The coffee can on the counter, full of sea glass, the stack of paperbacks on the side table, the wedding photo on the mantel, Richard and me, 36 years ago, standing on the church steps in borrowed sunshine. I opened the windows to let in the salt air. I wiped down the counters. I checked the water heater and the breaker box. Everything worked. Then I sat on the porch and called Alan again. "Claire, how are you holding up?" "I'm at the beach house," I said. "I've been thinking. I don't want to sell it. But I also don't want Michael to keep circling like a vulture." "What do you want to do?" "I want to make it clear that this place is mine to decide about. And I want to do something good with it, eventually. Maybe rent it to families in the summer. Maybe leave it to a charity when I'm gone. I don't know yet, but I want my options open." "That's smart," Alan said. "If you want, I can draft a simple letter to Mikkel's, just a plain English explanation of your legal position and your intentions. It won't be a threat, just clarity." "Do that," I said. "I'll have it to you by Monday." After we hung up, I walked down to the beach. The sand was cool under my feet. The ocean was the same gray-blue it always was, rolling in and out like breathing. I thought about all the summers Richard and I had spent here, the mornings we'd walked this beach looking for sand dollars, the evenings we'd grilled burgers on the porch and watched the sun drop into the water. Michael had been part of that, once, but he'd chosen to step away, and now he wanted to step back in and claim ownership of something he'd never tended. I wouldn't let him. Alan's letter arrived by email on Monday. It was 1 page, single-spaced, and written in plain English. No legalese, no threats, just facts. Dear Michael, I'm writing on behalf of your mother, Claire Donovan, to clarify the legal status of the beach house at 47 Sandpiper Lane. The property was purchased in 1994 by your parents, Richard and Claire Donovan, as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Under that arrangement, when one owner dies, the property automatically passes to the surviving owner. No probate is required. No estate division occurs. I filed an affidavit of survivorship with the county, officially recording Claire as the sole owner. This document is public record. It means that no one can sell, transfer, or mortgage the property without Claire's written consent. Your mother has full legal authority to decide the future of the beach house. She may keep it, rent it, sell it, or donate it. That decision is hers alone. If you have questions about this process, I'm happy to speak with you. But I want to be clear. Your mother's ownership is not in dispute. It is a matter of law. Sincerely, Alan Greer-esque. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Michael with a short note of my own. Michael, this is from Alan. He's explaining what I tried to tell you last week. I love you. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I need you to understand that the beach house is mine, and I'm going to make decisions about it in my own time. If you want to talk about this respectfully, I'm here. If you want to keep fighting, I won't engage. Love, Mom. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. He didn't reply. 2 weeks passed. I went to the grocery store. I answered sympathy cards. I sorted through Richard's clothes and donated most of them to Goodwill. I kept his favorite flannel shirt and a sweater that still smelled like him. Michael didn't call. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my sister Diane called. Claire, I just got off the phone with Michael. I closed my eyes. What did he say? He's upset. He says you're shutting him out. He says you're being unreasonable about the house. What do you think? I asked. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think he's being a spoiled brat. I think he's embarrassed because you didn't roll over, and now he's trying to get family on his side. I laughed. It came out shaky, but it was real. Thank you, I said. Listen, Diane continued. I told him the truth. I told him you and Richard paid for that house. I told him you kept it running. And I told him that if he can't see that, he's got bigger problems than a beach cottage. How'd he take it? He hung up on me, she said. Which tells you everything. After we hung up, I made myself lunch, a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, the kind of meal Richard used to make on rainy Saturdays. I ate slowly, tasting every bite. Then I called Alan one more time. I want to set up a rental arrangement for the beach house, I said. Something simple. A local property manager. Maybe families only. No party groups. I'll keep it for myself a few weeks each summer, but the rest of the time, I want it used. I want it loved. That's a great idea, Alan said. I know a property manager in that area. She's honest, thorough. I'll send you her contact info. Thank you, Claire, he said. You're doing the right thing. I know, I said. And I meant it. By December, the beach house had a property manager named Linda. She was 50-something, brisk and kind, and she knew the local market inside out. We agreed on a rental rate, a schedule, and a simple contract. Families could book the house for week-long stays, June through September. I'd keep the first 2 weeks of July for myself. Linda sent me photos after she staged the place, fresh linens, a bowl of lemons on the counter, the porch furniture arranged just so. It looked like home. It looked ready. The first booking came in mid-December, a family from Connecticut, 2 parents and 3 kids, looking for a quiet week in August. Linda sent me their deposit and a thank you note. I sat in my kitchen, holding the note, and felt something loosen in my chest. Not quite joy, not quite relief, something softer, permission, maybe, to move forward. Michael still hadn't called. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Diane and her husband, eating too much ham and watching old movies. Michael sent a text on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas, Mom. I replied, Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I love you. He didn't respond. In January, I got a call from Jennifer. Her voice was careful, measured. Claire, I wanted to reach out. I think we've all had time to cool down. I'm listening, I said. Michael's been doing a lot of thinking. He realizes he came on too strong. He was grieving, and he wasn't thinking clearly. I understand that, I said. I was grieving too. I know. She paused. He wants to apologize, but he's not sure you want to hear from him. I thought about that, about the weeks of silence, about the funeral, and the parish hall, and the phone calls that had gone unanswered. Tell him I'd like to hear from him, I said, but I need him to understand something first. The beach house is mine. I've rented it out to families for the summer. I'm keeping it. That's not up for negotiation. If he can accept that, we can talk. I'll tell him, Jennifer said. 2 days later, Michael called. Mom, hi, sweetheart, I'm sorry. His voice cracked. I was an ass. I was scared, and I don't know what I thought. I just didn't want to lose Dad, and I didn't want to lose the house, and I took it out on you. I closed my eyes. I know. Can we start over? He asked. We can try, I said. We didn't fix everything overnight, but we started talking again. Michael came over for dinner in February. We ate pasta and salad, and we didn't mention the beach house. We talked about his work, about Jennifer's new project, about a trip they were planning to Portugal. It felt fragile, but it felt real. In March, I invited them to the beach house for a weekend. Michael hesitated, then agreed. We drove out on a Saturday morning. The air was still cold, but the sun was bright. Michael helped me carry groceries up the porch steps. Jennifer made coffee while I unpacked. We spent the afternoon walking on the beach. Michael picked up a piece of sea glass pale green, smooth as soap, and handed it to me. For the collection, he said. I took it. Thank you. That night, we grilled burgers on the porch, just like Richard and I used to. Michael asked if I remembered the summer he broke his arm trying to skateboard off the seawall. I did. We laughed about it, how he'd cried in the car, how Richard had driven 20 miles to the emergency room with the radio blasting to distract him. Dad was a good father, Michael said quietly. He was, I agreed, and he loved you very much. Michael looked out at the water. I'm sorry I tried to take this place from you, Mom. I don't know what I was thinking. You were scared, I said, and grief makes us do strange things. Still, he said, I'm sorry. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Spring turned into summer. The beach house filled with renters' families from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland. Linda sent me updates, glowing reviews, polite guests, no problems. The house was earning its keep. It was doing what Richard and I had always wanted it to do, making people happy. I kept the first 2 weeks of July for myself, just as planned. I drove out on a Sunday morning, the car windows down, the radio playing something soft. The key still fit, the door still stuck. Inside, everything was clean. Linda had left fresh flowers on the counter, daisies in a mason jar. The coffee can was still there, still full of sea glass. I added the piece Michael had given me in March. I spent the week reading, walking, and sitting on the porch. I didn't do much. I didn't need to. The house held me the way it always had. On the last morning, I stood on the beach at sunrise and thought about Richard, about the life we'd built together, about the beach house and the summers, and the way love gets woven into places so thoroughly that it outlasts us. I thought about Michael, too, about the way he'd handed me that piece of sea glass, about the way we'd sat on the porch and remembered his father together. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. And that felt like enough. I made one call that changed everything. Not because it was dramatic or vengeful, but because it was simple. It was the truth, spoken clearly, backed by paperwork and patience, and the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing you've earned what you have. The beach house is still mine. I'll keep it as long as I can. I'll rent it to families who need a place to rest. I'll walk the beach and collect sea glass and remember the man I loved. And when I'm gone, I'll leave it to someone who'll care for it the way Richard and I did. Maybe a charity, maybe a scholarship fund, maybe a family who can't afford a place like this but deserves one anyway. I haven't decided yet, but the keys are in my pocket, and they're staying there. Michael understands that now. Jennifer does too. They visited again in August, and we spent a weekend together without tension. We cooked, we laughed, we talked about Richard without crying. On their last morning, Michael stood on the porch and looked out at the water. This place is special, Mom, he said. I know, I said. I'm glad you kept it. Me too. He hugged me before he left. A real hug, the kind he used to give me when he was small. After they drove away, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the waves roll in. The morning was cool. The air smelled like salt and possibility. I thought about the funeral, and the phone call, and the stack of receipts that proved what I already knew. I'd earned this, not through inheritance or luck, but through decades of care. I thought about Alan's voice on the phone, calm and certain. You paid for that house. You maintained it. You earned it. I thought about Diane's words. If he can't see that, he's got bigger problems than a beach cottage. And I thought about Richard, sitting beside me in spirit, humming under his breath the way he always did. The beach house stood solid behind me, ready for the next family, the next summer, the next season of love and repair. I finished my coffee and went inside. The keys stayed in my pocket. I didn't plan to go back to the beach house in September, but I found myself packing the car on a Friday afternoon anyway. The renters had finished for the season. Linda had sent her final report all positive, no damage, a waiting list for next summer. The house was clean and quiet, waiting for winter. I told myself I was going to check the storm shutters and drain the pipes, but really, I just wanted to be there. The drive took 90 minutes. I stopped once for gas and a bottle of water. The closer I got to the coast, the lighter I felt. By the time I turned onto Sandpiper Lane, my shoulders had dropped 2 inches. The house looked smaller in the autumn light. The hydrangeas by the porch had gone brown. The flag on the mailbox hung limp, but the bones of the place were still good. The cedar shakes Richard and I had chosen. The blue trim I'd painted myself one summer while he read to me from the porch. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lemons and salt. Linda always left the place better than she found it. I set my bag down and walked through the rooms slowly. The furniture was exactly where it belonged. The coffee can still sat on the counter. I picked it up and shook it gently, listening to the soft rattle of glass. 31 years of summers, collected in a Folgers can. I carried it to the porch and sat in Richard's chair, the one with the worn armrest and the faded cushion. The ocean was calmer than it had been in July. The gulls were quieter. The beach was nearly empty. I thought about the day of the funeral, about standing in the vestibule with damp sleeves and a smudged hymn book, about Michael's glance across the room, calculating and cold. I thought about how close I'd come to losing this place. Not legally, Alon had made that impossible, but emotionally, how easy it would have been to say, "Fine, take it. I don't have the energy to fight." But I hadn't said that. I'd made one call, and everything had shifted. That evening, I walked down to the beach. The sand was cool and damp under my feet. The sun was setting behind the dunes, painting the sky in shades of peach and lavender. I found a flat rock and sat watching the water. A couple walked past me, holding hands, their dog running circles around them. They nodded. I nodded back. For a moment, we were just 3 people sharing a stretch of sand. I thought about Richard, about the way he'd loved this beach, about the time he'd tried to teach Michael to buff the surf, and they'd both ended up tumbling in the waves, laughing and choking on salt water. Michael had been 8, maybe 9. He'd looked at his father like Richard hung the moon. Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into the man who showed up at a funeral with a real estate appraisal on his phone? I didn't have an answer, but I knew this: people could come back from bad decisions. Michael was trying. That had to count for something. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Diane. "How's the house?" I typed back, "Perfect, quiet, just what I needed." Her reply came quickly. "Good, you earned it." I smiled and tucked the phone away. The next morning, I woke to fog. It pressed against the windows like something living, thick and gray and soft. I made coffee and took it out to the porch, wrapping myself in one of Richard's old sweaters. The fog erased the ocean. I could hear the waves but couldn't see them. It felt like being inside a cloud. I thought about the renters who'd stayed here all summer. Families from cities, looking for a break. Kids who'd probably never seen a starfish up close. Parents who'd sat on this porch and watched their children play in the sand and felt, for 1 week, like the world wasn't so heavy. That's what the beach house was for. Not for accumulation or profit. Not for dividing or claiming. For rest. For memory. For the simple act of being somewhere beautiful and letting it hold you. Richard had understood that. I understood it too. Michael was learning. On Sunday, I drove home. The fog had lifted by then, and the sky was a hard, bright blue. I stopped at a farm stand and bought apples and a jar of honey. The woman at the register told me the honey was local, from hives just 3 miles down the road. Best you'll ever taste, she said. I believed her. When I got home, the house felt too quiet again. I unpacked slowly, putting the apples in a bowl on the counter, setting the honey beside the stove. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I had an email from Linda. Claire, I wanted to give you a heads up. We already have 12 families on the waiting list for next summer. I think we could raise the rate by 10% and still fill every week. Let me know what you think. I stared at the screen. 12 families. People I'd never meet, but who would sleep in the beds Richard and I had chosen. Who would drink coffee on the porch and collect sea glass, and leave with memories that might last a lifetime. I typed back, keep the rate the same. I'd rather keep it accessible. Thanks for everything, Linda. Her reply came within minutes. You're a class act, Claire. I closed the laptop and looked around the kitchen. At the table where Richard used to do crosswords. At the window where we'd hung bird feeders every winter. At the photos on the wall, our wedding, Michael's graduation. A trip we'd taken to Maine one autumn when the leaves were on fire. This house held 36 years of marriage. The beach house held 31 years of summers. Both places were saturated with love and effort and the quiet work of making a life. No one could take that from me. Not with demands or guilt or legal threats. I'd made one call, and the keys had stayed in my pocket. But more than that, I'd stood my ground. I'd known my worth. I'd refused to shrink or apologize or hand over something I'd earned just to keep the peace. And in doing that, I'd taught Michael something he needed to learn. That love doesn't mean surrender. That kindness doesn't mean weakness. That a mother can be gentle and fierce at the same time. Michael called that evening. Hey Mom. Hi sweetheart. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I'm good, I said. I was at the beach house this weekend. Yeah, how was it? Peaceful. I walked on the beach, sat on the porch, drank too much coffee. He laughed. That sounds perfect. We talked for 20 minutes. About nothing important, his work, Jennifer's project, a movie they'd watched. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation we used to have before Richard got sick, before the funeral, before everything went sideways, before we hung up. He said, Mom, I know I've said this before, but I really am sorry about the house, about how I acted. I know, I said, and I forgive you. But Michael, I need you to understand something. I'm not keeping the beach house out of spite. I'm keeping it because it's mine, because your father and I built something there, and I'm not done with it yet. I get that now, he said. I really do. Good, I said. Because when I'm gone, that house is going to do something good. I haven't decided what yet, but it won't just sit empty, and it won't get flipped for a profit. It'll matter. That's the right call, Mom. After we hung up, I sat in the living room and thought about legacy, about what we leave behind when we're gone. Richard left me his love and his steadiness and the beach house we'd built together. I would leave something to, not just property or money, but proof that a life well lived creates value that can't be measured on a balance sheet. The beach house would keep making families happy. It would keep holding people the way it had held Richard and me, and that felt like the best kind of forever. I made one call that changed everything, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was true, because I knew what I'd earned, and I wasn't afraid to claim it. The keys are still in my pocket, the house is still mine, and when I'm ready, when the time is right, I'll decide what comes next. But for now, I'm keeping it. I am keeping the summers and the sea glass, and the porch where Richard used to hum while I painted trim. I'm keeping the memory of him, the memory of us, the proof that love, when tended carefully, builds something that lasts. Michael understands that now, and so do I. If you're still here, thanks for listening, and I'll meet you in the comments. Your voice matters.